talking to each other over the computer, over Skype, thinking, getting to know each other, and they made trips to come and see me. And when we got into the close proximity of each other, it was like something happened. And, I spoke with pastors, I spoke with researchers. What's going on here? What just happened here? I don't understand what happened. And I had people say, she's got a demon within her. She's been possessed. And that's what it seemed like. I mean, it was like there was a whole different person looking at me through beautiful blue eyes. Or brown eyes, so we're not getting specific here. But they just changed almost instantly. And I don't know if they were on medications or not. I don't think so. On some of them, but I don't know. I don't know what they were doing in the past. I don't know what they were doing. What is that? And to a lot of people out there, I mean, the people are fighting. The people are angry. I don't hate anybody. I'm accused of hate crimes because I talk about the Jewish connection. I talk about the Edomite connection. I talk about the Canaanite connection. And I just got a story up here that I find interesting. Well, I've got you on here. The Israeli politicians have decided that the New Testament is anti-Semitic. Even as the Zionists in Palestine bombarded the Gaza Strip, another form of Zionist aggression drew less attention: the continuing Zionist war against Christianity. A Knesset member, Michael Ben Ari, publicly destroyed a copy of the New Testament, saying this abominable book galvanized the murder of millions of Jews during the Inquisition and during auto de fe instances. Sending the book to the MK is a provocation. There is no doubt that this book and all it represents belongs in the garbage can of history. Now, I feel almost the same way about some of the Old Testament, because my impression of God, if he's a loving God, he ain't telling you to smash babies' heads against the rocks or kill everybody in the city. I'd like to get your opinion on that.
Well, things were different before Yeshua or Jesus came to the earth to live among men and die for their sins. God was dealing with the nation of Israel back then in a way that these pagans that surrounded the Hebrews in the Bible were just alienated from God. And they just didn't have the infrastructure to take care of their babies. I mean, that might seem cold-hearted, but in the end, God's plan for everybody is going to be so wonderful that even those people that were killed back then in the Jewish wars will be resurrected. A Zionist is someone who supports Israel's existence as a nation. I have nothing against Israel existing as a nation, but that doesn't mean I support evils perpetrated by Jews either. Today we're under Christian law. We're not under the law of the Old Testament per se. We're under the law of the Old Testament, but we're not. We don't have directives as Christians. We turn the other cheek. We're supposed to pray for our enemies, and if anyone doesn't accept that from Jesus or Yeshua, that to pray for your enemies and to turn the other cheek and pray for those persecuting you, then they're antichrist, and that includes people calling themselves Jews.
Well, they've certainly, you know, called, they refer to Jesus as burning in hell right now, and, you know, it's, I would call that pretty antichrist. We're glad we, killed Jesus. We'd do it again. I mean, I've listened to some of their quotes that they put up on YouTube. But, you know, I believe, also, I believe that you and
one person say,
what's that, sir?
one person out of many, but the thing is, I've also seen many Jews saying that they accept Yeshua as their Savior too, or Jesus.
Well,
and so just one Jew saying that they would kill them all over again is not speaking for every Jew.
No, last week.
There is an organization called Jews for Jesus.
Yes, sir. And there's some Jews, Orthodox Jews in Australia that are speaking out against Zionism. They've organized marches. And last week I had an IDF soldier who had been put in charge of, you know, controlling the Palestinians in the West Bank, and he saw it wrong. He became what they would call a refusenik. No, I'm not going to kill these people. No, I'm not going to shoot teenagers. I also played and got it up on my Facebook site, a beautiful American Jewish girl that went to Palestine, that went to Gaza, that went to Iran, and she countered all of the propaganda that's put out to trying to make us hate Muslims, hate you know, Christians, hate the Palestinians. And I kind of believe, in my studies, and I've had a number of people that were practicing Christian identity, and the only thing they're saying is, hey, we crossed the Caucasus Mountains, turned left, they started calling us Germans, they started calling us Caucasians, and then we came to England, we came to Spain, we came to France, and we did what God told us to do. We populated the world. We built civilizations here. And I think if you're trying to build a civilization rather than tear it down, rather than murder people, then you're working for the right side. And Israel as a country, most of the Israelis, 90% of the Israelis there, are really so-called Jews, as Benjamin Friedman referred to them. Their ancestors came from a place called Khazaria, which they're trying to take back right now because it's called the Ukraine now. They're trying to go back in there. They're trying to take that piece of land back from the Russians, and quite capable of starting another war over that. But the Benjamin Friedman, who's a Jewish historian, and some Israeli scientists said these people were never of the tribe of Israel, never of the tribes of Israel. We got to take a break. We'll be right back here. Stay with me.
Really going on in the world that mainstream media won't tell you. At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a large selection of archived programs. TruthRadio.com. The truth is out there.
Let me say it for you so you don't have to. Who wants to know anything more about the JFK assassination? Well, I'll tell you who. You. Once you see the DVD I can send you from Truth Radio on that subject, you will be so grateful. You'll start listening to this thing and watching it. You'll say, this I have seen over and over again. Where are we going with this? Why do we have to be bored by all this repetition? And then, about a third of the way through this DVD, your eyes will be so far wide open. You will be astonished at the documentation and the new information, the startling revelations. Ask for the JFK DVD when you write Truth Radio, P.O. Box 344, Nipomo, California, 93444. Do it today.
All right. We're back, and Sam Moser is my guest today. We're talking about Psychiatry Kills, documented proof, psychiatric drugs, shorten the lifespan. I mean, all of the drugs that you've got listed here on your article, Sam, and that's all linked up there on my site. I mean, chloropromazine, flu.
They're all antipsychotic drugs.
Yeah, it's
It seems
incredible.
like everybody else wanted to focus on antidepressants, but I focused on antipsychotics.
And this geodone, you say that's almost
It's very supernatural in the way it exerts its effects.
what are they using here? Antipsychotic. I mean, I can almost agree with the doctors that a large percentage of Americans are psychotic, are programmed, are mind controlled, are misled, and of course the Mossad, which isn't.
Psychosis is just an expanded consciousness and an awareness that is misunderstood. A schizophrenic is actually just somebody with an expanded consciousness and an awareness, and they're misunderstood by the psychiatric staff.
What about this whole post-traumatic stress syndrome? I think that's simply soldiers that are coming back that have got a conscience and are aware of what they've been doing has been wrong.
Yeah. Well, if they're having if they're coming back with a conscience and they're feeling bad about what they've done in the war, then they need to seek God and pray to God for forgiveness of whatever they've done in that when they were in the war that they're having guilt feelings about. They need to find God and get forgiveness for their sins. And the best way to do that, Clayton, the best way to get forgiveness of sins is to partake of the Lord's Supper, the wine and the unleavened bread. Go get yourself a bottle of wine. Say a prayer that leads you to a bottle of wine. And make yourself some unleavened bread in the oven. Unleavened bread is just flour and water. Just mix flour and water together and bake it in the oven. And say a prayer so it comes out baked real nice. And unleavened bread is not rolled out. Don't roll it out like a cracker. Otherwise, it'll be too hard to eat. Just bake it as a lump. Put your oil on your pan, and then be sure to add some salt to it. There's nothing wrong with adding salt to it because Yeshua's disciples were called the salt of the earth. But anyway, the Lord's Supper it's for forgiveness of sins, and it also cleanses the body. And that's the best way of getting close to God and getting forgiveness for your sins, is to partake of the Lord's Supper.
For many years, I sold a soap called Miracle 2 because Clayton Teddleton had prayed to God and asked him what he should do, and God wrote a formula in lights on his wall. He woke his wife up and said, "Honey, can you see that?" "No, go back to sleep, Clayton." "No, you gotta wake up. You gotta get up. You gotta write this down. I'll read it to you." And next morning they found they'd made soap. And it was a pretty remarkable soap, too, Miracle 2. But let me ask you this. Now, you got, you just talked about schizophrenia or psychotic psychoses. And you say here those drugs are often given to people with depression, maniac depression, bipolar disorder, mania, Alzheimer's patients or those suffering from Alzheimer's disease, people with brain damage or head injuries, which is what they tried to do to me, retarded children and adults. Many children have attention deficit disorder or ADD or ADHD, and children and teenagers simply have a hot temper. Now, what do...
These are diagnoses of psychiatrists, and I don't necessarily give them legitimacy for their diagnoses. Someone with attention deficit disorder is just a normal child that is just normal child behavior. Being hyper, there ain't nothing wrong with a child being hyper. Put them in swimming.
That's they are simply creating diseases out of nothing, aren't they?
They sure are.
And then they create this disease, and then they got a pill for it at a 2,000% markup. Well, I certainly appreciate the work that you're doing, because people really need to know the truth about that. They know to avoid this. You don't have to go to the doctor being well. You can pull your shoes off and walk in the grass under the trees out here and probably be more in contact with God than you could get in a church, I believe. Because most of those churches got Masonic cornerstones.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's something I did too, as I exposed Freemasonry. I'm on www.masonicinfo.com as an anti-Mason. Probably something you didn't know about, Clayton.
No, give me that. www what?
Masonicinfo.com. It says anti-Masonry points of view. Instead of telling them what my anti-Masonry points of view are, they just try to demonize me and make me look like, get people to have bad feelings about me.
Well, they've certainly tried to do that with me. You know, he put building number 7 on the cover of his magazine. He must be anti-Semitic. And I don't care who your grandmother slept with, you know. It's what you're doing today. Are you working for the good of the people, or are you working for the people that want to enslave us? We're really enslaved. I've said that I think they have refined the art of slavery to the point that the slave don't know they're slaves.
Well, they're trying to make me a slave. I may not have a secular job, but they every once in a while they'll bring me into a psychiatric facility, inject me with medicines. That's how you deal with a slave. If you don't like what they're doing, you try to keep them down. That's what they did to me.
Now, what excuse are they using for you? Why would, I can't imagine. It's difficult for me to imagine, even after all I've been through, somebody coming in here and, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. I stand corrected. They did that to me. My son signed a document, and they came in, and the police came in and hauled me off to a psychiatric facility. I said, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this? Well, your son signed this paper, and so we've got to do this. But don't worry about it, Clay. As soon as you see a psychiatrist, they're going to let you go. They're going to let you go. And they did.
That's not what happened, so...
They did
They
at that
did
time.
let you go?
Yeah, they did let me go.
Who was it they let go?
They let me go. They let me after I spent about 6 hours into a mental ward at the police station, And when I finally got before the psychiatrist in the afternoon, he called my son in and told my son that he thought he needed the counseling and he needed some care here because there wasn't anything wrong with me. So I was able to
For your
walk out
listeners,
of it.
I want them to know what haloperidol is. Haldol. This is not in the report that I wrote on psychiatric drugs. The molecular structure of haloperidol, Haldol, contains as its molecular structure fluorobenzene, chlorobenzene, butanone, and hydroxypiperidine. Piperidine is fire ant venom. Butanone is a petrochemical and is added to gasoline to increase its octane. And fluorobenzene and chlorobenzene are even more toxic derivatives of the cancer-causing petrochemical benzene. And that's what Haldol is. That's what the Haldol molecule consists of.
Who makes that, Pfizer?
Let's see. I'm on the Wikipedia internet site right now. They don't say who makes it. Haldol is made by. It's not copyrighted anymore. Anybody can make it. There's generic versions of it now.
What if you feed
That's
somebody
generally
a house?
what they'll inject
What if you?
people involuntarily as Haldol.
Well, it was certainly
If you're refusing
involuntary. Beg your pardon?
If you're refusing medicines, antipsychotics, and they want to give you an antipsychotic, generally they'll give you either Haldol or Prolixin, because they can give you a dex shot of that, and they can give somebody a dex shot of that, which is a long-acting shot, because they don't like to inject people daily, day after day. And if they give somebody a dex shot, that'll last a month after they're released. It's still in their system for a month.
Well, I'm sure it was still in my system for a month after that. I came back and didn't get along with my family very well after I got out of the hospital. You know, because they wanted me to quit, they wanted me to stop, they wanted me to go fishing somewhere, and all I wanted to do was go back to work.
Okay.
And that didn't fit in with anybody's plan.
The first class of antipsychotics were called phenothiazines, and the report I got on the internet focuses mainly on the phenothiazines. And a phenothiazine, if you look it up on Wikipedia, has a molecule that has 3 hexagons in a row. And a hexagon is a 6-sided shape. And so therefore, the phenothiazine derivative drugs all contain that number 666 as part of their molecular structure. And they're still injecting Prolixin into people involuntarily, which is a phenothiazine.
Well, let me ask you about the other attack on our health and our sanity, and that's all of these vaccinations. I've got a film. I filmed the first Homeland Security meeting. I got a film called True Face of FEMA that after they rolled FEMA into Department of Homeland Security, they sent Colonel John Brinkerhoff down to Sandia Labs in Albuquerque to do a lecture. And he said in case of a single outbreak of smallpox in a major metropolitan area, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. In other words, some of us won't line up on the Walmart parking lot to get a vaccination for a disease that's been eradicated in this country for over 100 years. And what he said 10 years ago, I see happening now. I see it happen in Boston. I see it happened in Ferguson. They've militarized the police and armed them to the teeth with everything from tanks, armored vehicles, and automatic weapons. And they're just waiting for one of these diseases. Now they're talking about Ebola. And let's see, who has a patent on Ebola? Yeah. Center for Disease Controls in Atlanta got a patent on a form of Ebola. Now, why would somebody that's supposed to be keeping us healthy, want to own a patent on one of the most deadly diseases out there? Is there some logic there that I'm missing?
They must be wanting to profit off of it.
Well, if they
The only reason to patent something would be to profit off of it.
That's right. So if Ebola breaks up, that strain of Ebola breaks out, then the CDC will be able to patent to lend the patent to the pharmaceutical companies so they can create a vaccination from us. And what do these vaccines do? They give you a mild case of the disease, so to build up your immunity, supposedly. But I'm just not sure what the mercury and the tryptophan and all the other stuff in these vaccinations are. Can you talk about these vaccinations? What is going on there? Why would our children, when right after they're born, be injected with mercury? Was there a safe amount of mercury that I don't know about?
Well, the thimerosal is an organic kind of mercury. At least they're not injecting elemental mercury into people. Thimerosal is an organic mercury, organic form of mercury. It's not like they're injecting people with elemental mercury.
Okay. Sort of a good thing on our behalf, but what about all this stuff? What about this whole vaccination?
Elemental mercury.
I never got a vaccination. I never let my children have vaccination. They wanted to give them to them in school. I wouldn't let them have it. They're still healthy.
No, vaccinations. Keep your children away from vaccinations. When I was living in the Philippines, there was a family there that vaccinated all their children except for one, the youngest child. And they were talking about how they were always spending the money on medicines for the other children. But the youngest child, because they were always getting sick, but the youngest child never got sick, and they never had to spend their money on medicines for that child. And that child was the only one that wasn't vaccinated. That was the only difference between her and her older siblings, was that she was never vaccinated. They're making poor people poorer with their vaccinations in these third world countries, in these developing countries. They make poor people poorer with their vaccinations. And it makes the pharmaceutical industry richer, because they can, when these people get sick from, they may not come down with the sickness, the sicknesses that they were vaccinated for, but they're still getting sick, and they're buying medicines. And these vaccinations only serve to make the medical industry richer.
Yeah, it's all about the money. Follow the money, folks, and you'll find out. Now, there is I've got one article up here that I think I should touch on, because I do believe they are planning for World War III. They're trying to do it in numerous places, in Iraq, in Iran, in Afghanistan, in the Ukraine. They're trying to set us up against Russia, because the bankers fund both sides of the wars, and I'm sure they've got our soldiers insured to some extent. So if they get killed, somebody will pay off their respective governments. And they've also tried to kill our own troops, Agent Orange, depleted uranium, all of the vaccinations that they give you when you go into the Army to go overseas. Dave Hodges is those articles that I use in my magazine. And he says a lot has happened in the last 72 hours. By all indications, the East and West are once again positioning for a face-off that may well result in the next global conflict. What he's talking about are the BRICS countries. This is Brazil, Russia, Iran, and China are lining up to get away from the U.S. dollar. China has probably more gold than any other country. How they got it, how they accumulated it, I don't know. But they've got all this gold that they've accumulated, and they're willing to put it in back currency, alternative currency. So that may be happening. And of course, Germany tried to do the same thing, and we went to war with Germany. All the communist countries, the Soviet Union, England, and the United States went up against Germany, who hadn't threatened anybody, hadn't done anything wrong, certainly didn't try to start a war, but they wanted to be independent, and so they didn't want what happened in Russia with the murder of 60 million white Christian Russians. And I've tried to tell people the whole Cold War was a farce. We were never, the Russian people never been our enemies. They created enemies. Then the Germans were certainly never our enemies. Most of the people right here in Texas, like me, are descended from Germans that came over here legally. But, this time around, the last time this happened, over 60 million people across the planet were dead before it was all said and done. This time, humanity has weapons at its disposal that are so capable of widespread destruction, we could be literally facing the annihilation of the majority of the human race. Now, make no mistake, both the United States and Russia are prepared to use them. Yes, our leaders will be working to peacefully resolve this crisis, but so did global leaders prior to World War I and II, and we know how that turned out. And Dave Hodges says, our children picked a very bad time to be born. Indeed, the world stands on the brink of a conflagration of unprecedented scale and destruction. It's go ahead, sir. How do you see this? How do you see this happen?
I was pointing out earlier that communities are vulnerable if there was no electricity or running water, because the way the communities are designed, they're dependent on electricity for the heat in the wintertime, and they're also depending on that running water. That's why people need their own hand pump well, put a hand pump well in the front yard, and they also need a fireplace. Communities need these things, and the more people do it, the less dependent they would be if there was some kind of crisis or disaster that cut off the electricity and running water. People would still have a fireplace and a hand pump well they could rely on. But in these communities, people just don't have that.
I have tried to tell people, if you plant food in your backyard instead of grass, grow food, not grass, and if you put solar and a wind generator on the roof of your home, tell the neighborhood association to kiss your ass, put up the wind and the solar, then you don't need the government for nothing. You can generate your own electricity from just what God gave you. And there's more to it. I just had Dave Woods, or Mr. Woods, on my show a few days ago, last week, and he's invented a new device that a coil that gets better power and transmits power better, and you can really use it to build your own little generator right in your own home. It works in your home, magnetics, and it works off of magnetics. We've got the technology. We got the technology, and if we had a mass revolution here of understanding, we could go to electric cars, which were torn up and destroyed, 50 years ago. You could put wheels. You can put wheels on an electric vehicle that will charge the batteries while it's rolling. So it's like a perpetual motion machine. You turn on the electricity and you generate it, and it recharges the battery while you're driving. We don't need the gasoline. We don't, and with the magnetic generators, we don't need the electrical lines that are strung from power plant to power plant. Germany's done it. Germany, if you drive in the country, you see all of these farms out there with solar on the roof. It's getting less expensive. It's getting, they've got new materials out. So we're really capable of being totally independent. And so now the government is going after people that have got a garden. I mean, they're trying to stomp on gardens. They're sending jackbooted thugs in to stomp on the tomatoes. Did that up in Arlington, a little place in Arlington, Texas. They were growing their own food. They called it the Garden of Eden. And the cops went in, handcuffed some of them, held them hostage for a while. Didn't find any drugs, didn't find any marijuana, didn't find anything except tomatoes, and they stepped on them. So
that's crazy.
Well, we view it as insane unless the whole object of our government is to keep us enslaved, keep us in bread lines, keep us dependent on them for our food. And that's what they're doing, isn't it?
I don't like the watermelon choices I get at the grocery store. Seedless irradiated.
All right, well, I suggest everybody check your thing out. You're welcome to stay if you want. I'm going to talk about World War III here. There's a blueprint for World War III out now, and I think it's important enough that people know about this. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take this last half hour here to talk about that. But you're welcome to stay if you want. And interject anything that you want.
It's been nice being your guest, Clayton.
We'll do it again. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
And you stay as long as you want.
You have a nice day. Remainder of the radio show.
All right, sir. Thank you. It'll be up on my website under your name. All they got to do is click on your name and hear the show.
Okay.
All right, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. Let me see here. All right. He's gone here. And now this is the first of a two-part series which details the coming war. The war will not be a simple war of occupation, says Dave Hodges. This is an article by Dave Hodges. I believe the name of his show is The Common Sense Show. He says, it will not be a simple war of occupation such as we saw in Iran and presently in Afghanistan. The war will be utterly devastating and has the potential to escalate into a conflict befitting the overused term Armageddon. Part 1 of this series will present what boxing fans call the tale of tape, The tale of tape entails identifying the combatants, their respective sides, as well as the relative strengths of the participants and their military forces. The coming war will feature what pundits call the BRIC nations, B-R-I-C nations, and the USA and her allies. Each side of this coming conflict possesses widely divergent military strength, weaknesses, and strategies. The U.S. is dependent on a devastating first strike attack. The United States and her allies have a decided advantage of quick strike, long-range battlefield capabilities because of the superior aircraft and carrier strike capabilities. The BRIC nations have an advantage with manpower, rocket-propelled grenades, and tanks. The USA and her allies cannot win a sustained battlefield campaign because of the attrition factor. The Chinese have demonstrated the ability to negate the United States Navy's technological advantage through the use of killer satellites. Therefore, the entire U.S. strategy is predicated on the first strike before the Chinese can destroy the majority of the eyes and ears of the U.S. military, namely its superior satellite capabilities in which the U.S. forces can quickly locate and destroy the enemy with its smart weapons before the enemy knows what hit them. And by the way, there was an article up about a first strike in Israel using a beam weapon, and that beam weapon, I was there at White Sands Missile Range, toured the facility. I was told by the general in charge of White Sands that this was a dual Israeli and American project. That was the airborne laser project. That airborne laser was what was used on the BP oil platform to try to destroy our food supply and economy in the Gulf. It was used to kill somebody, some Hamas leader, in his car while he was driving down the street. And we've also got, these are airborne lasers, they're in use now. The nuclear submarines are the X factors, because nuclear submarines are often looked at as the great equalizer. No matter who is winning on the ground, in the air, and on the surface of the oceans, the submarine force has the capability to rain down unimaginable destruction upon their enemy. In the case of submarines, the U.S. and her allies are matched by their BRIC counterparts. Most subs carry 8 nuclear missiles, each capable of destroying a major city. The USA presumably has superior evasive techniques and therefore would presumably survive sub-killer strategies. With greater frequency than their BRIC adversaries. Therefore, the BRIC nations might win every land battle. However, the victorious BRIC nations would not have many of its cities left to return to in case of a nuclear war. The U.S. submarines are in effect a formidable doomsday weapon. For the United States and her allies to win a conventional war, a quick strike, surprise engagement is critical to the success of these forces. The BRICS would have an advantage in a longer, prolonged conflict. This is particularly true when one considers that if time permitted, the Chinese have bragged they could put 100 million men on a battlefield, following the teachings of Sun Tzu in the famous book Art of War. It's critical that the BRIC nations be brought to the battlefield of choice by the USA for a quick and decisive engagement. From a conventional warfare standpoint, the engagement is likely to be naval and involve aircraft. This plays to the advantage of the USA, whose superior long strike capability is enhanced by their superior aircraft carriers. The U.S. forces would likely engage in a distracting land engagement, first to hold and occupy the maximum number of BRIC forces, The land strike, a first strike, would be directed at Syria. Given the present crisis, the Russians would have to decide on choosing between protecting its eastern border with the NATO forces poised to attack, or destroying or launching an offensive directed at protecting Syria. The Russians will choose self-defense. The timing of the American invasion of Syria will take place when a sufficient number of American naval vessels are present in the Black Sea to checkmate the Russian military buildup in Crimea, which would serve as a staging area for military action in Syria. At the end of the day, once a large contingent of the American Navy has moved into position off the Baltic states, Russia will be powerless to prevent a U.S. takeover of Syria. The path and progress of the CIA force, ISIS, as it creates more designed havoc in Syria, will provide the impetus for the U.S. forces to enter Syria, thus provoking a Russian and a BRIC nation unified response. Conventional wisdom states that once the U.S. occupies Syria, Russia will be powerless to intervene on behalf of America's next target, Iran, because the U.S. medium-range missile batteries will prevent the Russians from moving south into the region. With Russia out of the way, Iran will capitulate and stop selling oil for gold to the BRIC nations, and the petrodollar will be preserved. Iran will agree to the control of their oil fields by the U.S. to avoid an invasion. They will capitulate because nobody will come to their rescue. At least that's what the U.S. is hoping for. And the second part, which hopefully will be in tomorrow, the next day, will present a more likely scenario. So what about India and China? Will they move to protect Iran and thus erode the petrodollar? Not exactly, as China and India have their hands full. The naval strike we speak of will be directed at China. Before commencement of hostilities, China will be given a short time to stand down or face destruction by U.S. submarines and the long-range capabilities of U.S. carriers. It's only necessary to target China's major cities to force capitulation. This strategy would free the disenchanted Chinese living in the rebellious outlying provinces to launch a revolution against Beijing. It is also rumored that the U.S. does have space-based nuclear weapons. If this is the case, this conflict could be over in the early mornings hours of the first day. The Chinese submarine force could be capable of taking out several U.S. cities, however. Their submarines alone will not change the outcome. India will be held in check by Pakistan. Subsequently, India will never enter the fight. U.S. forces in Afghanistan could block a Russian invasion of Pakistan from the north. It's clear that the USA and her allies will decisively defeat BRIC nations in the conventional war so long as it is a short conflict. However, there's one game-changing strategy which the BRICS could employ. If the BRICS nations were to simultaneously launch a series of high-altitude ICBMs over every theater of potential war, the high-altitude nuclear blast could create an EMP attack on a global scale. Such an action would negate the technological advantages of the U.S. military and certainly reduce the conflict to brutal savagery, which would be dominated by global famine. Certainly the super elite would experience their much coveted population reduction on an unprecedented scale. This action would ultimately produce a military stalemate, and the war would disintegrate into one brute force versus another for a very long time. The popular TV show Revolution comes to mind. More on its trigger events, along with detailed chronology, will be presented in the next part of this series. The BRICS military strength, conventional military strength. Russia has 766,000 men, China 2,825,000, India 1,325,000, for a total of 4,916,000. The plains, BRICS has 7,655. We have 20,475. The men in the USA force, a little less than China's and Russia's. We've got 3,345,830. Tanks, we've got 8,325. BRICS has 14,269. They have 4 carriers, we have 13. We've got, and this is not just the U.S., this is the USA, the U.K., France, Germany, Turkey, Korea, and Japan. We've got a total of 141 subs. The BRICS nations has 148. We've got 5,843 rockets. BRICS has 5,843 rockets. We have 2,700. Now, the nuclear arsenals of the BRICS versus the USA and our allies are equivalent on paper. However, the reliability factor related to the weapons clearly favors the USA. To the sane person, the topic of nuclear war is almost a moot point. If either side resorts to the use of nuclear weapons on anything more than the battlefield scale with tactical nuclear weapons, this would render the conflict meaningless, as the planet would be a very undesirable place to inhabit. Then again, the psychopathic elite, safely tucked away in the tunnels beneath the Denver International Airport, may feel they have the ability to wait out the devastation going on above. Following data demonstrates the ultimate futility of employing nuclear weapons on a regional or an intercontinental basis. Of course, recognizing the futility of such utter destruction and hoping this would serve as a deterrent to the psychopathic bankers from starting such a conflict cannot be counted on. After all, if one's ultimate goal is the destruction and reduction of 90% of the human race, and a nuclear war would constitute the level of chaos needed in order to bring forth this order out of chaos, which would be needed to usher in a new world order. This makes nuclear war more, not less, likely. Alright, I'm not going to go in all detail of all the nuclear weapons. So let's just skip to the conclusion here. Your children picked a very bad time to be born. The only winners in what is coming will be the Satan-serving bankers who are bankrolling both sides of the coming conflict. It is the hope of this author and me, Clay Douglas. These facts will demonstrate the utter destruction that billions of innocent people on the planet face. Could these be the last days before the tribulation and ultimate judgment? Perhaps, but the Bible cautions us we will not know the exact time of the return of Jesus. Certainly, the conditions are ripe for nuclear conflict, and it is all so tragic and avoidable. Jesus showed humanity over 2,000 years ago who the real enemy of humanity is. It is unquestionably demonic, but manifests itself in the human form of a banker. Man was not meant to engage in banker wars of profit. No wonder Jesus chased a money changer from the temple with a whip. The world needs an Occupy Basel movement where the Bank of International Settlements reside. Such a movement would be needed in order to save humanity. The psychopathic bankers need to be imprisoned in order to save humanity from complete destruction. Don't hold your breath. Martial law followed by World War III is probably unavoidable. Dave Hodges is an award-winning psychology, statistics, and research professor, a college basketball coach, a mental health counselor, a political activist and writer who has published dozens of articles in several publications such as the Free American, Freedom's Phoenix, News with Views, and the Arizona Republic. And the Common Sense Show features a wide variety of important topics that range from the loss of constitutional liberties to the subsequent implementation of a police state under world governments to explore the limits of human potential. The primary purpose of the Common Sense Show is to provide Americans with the tools necessary to reclaim both our individual and national sovereignty, and you can follow his work at his website, on Facebook, or Twitter. Thank you for that information. How's this doing? Wow. Almost recorded an hour here. Now, again, to get back to today's subject, repeated infinitesimal amounts of fluoride will in time reduce the individual's power to resist domination by slowly poisoning and narcotizing certain areas of the brain, thus making him submissive to the will of those who wish to govern him. Both the Germans and the Russians added fluoride to the drinking water of prisoners of war to make them stupid and docile. And it's interesting that George Estabrook, an advisor for the U.S. government on hypnotism and psychological behavior control, later became chairman of the Department of Psychology at Colgate University. Internationally, Colgate was and remains today the most ardent producer and advocate of fluoridated toothpaste. Use of chemicals by the government to modify behavior of select population groups is not new. During the first two world wars, bromides were administered to servicemen to dim the libido in an attempt to inhibit forays into local bordellos. Today in Australia, the military fluoridates the drinking water of the soldiers, ostensibly to protect the teeth. However, since the mythical ability of fluorides to prevent tooth decay only exists in those under the age of 12, it's certainly the real purpose is less altruistic. In a volume 1 of Matrix 3, we discussed the role of alcoa aluminum in the production of fluoride, the role of alcoa lawyer Louis Oscar Ewing, who eventually gained control of what was to become the United States Public Health Service, his promotion of fluoridation, and the use of advertising and false propaganda in an attempt to sell water fluoridation to an unsuspecting public. Interestingly, it turns out that Alcoa transferred its sodium fluoride production technology to Germany in 1939 under the Alted Agreement, and Dow Chemical transmitted its experience and knowledge to Germany during the same period. So we have the U.S. transmitting technology to Germany before the war that allows Germany to experiment on select elements of the European population. And then after the war, the scientists, Nazi scientists, and results of fluoridation are brought back to the United States under Operation Paperclip. Curious, isn't it? A little research turned up the fact that IG Farben developed organophosphate nerve agents, Zyklon B, cyanide-based extermination gas, supposedly used on the Jews during the war, and many other interesting substances. IG Farben, financially supported by the U.S., was the first to develop and process heroin and cocaine. They also developed fluorinated nerve gases, sarin and soma. Farben had many connections with companies in the United States and Britain. In a letter abstracted from fluoridation and lawlessness, published by the Committee for Mental Health and National Research with obvious implications from the aforementioned Charles Perkins, U.S. appointed warhead of IG Farben, to the Lee Foundation for Nutritional Research, Milwaukee, we read the following. We are told by the fanatical ideologists who are advocating the fluoridation of water supplies in this country that their purpose is to reduce the incidence of tooth decay in children, and it is the plausibility of this excuse plus the gullibility of the public and the cupidity of public officials that is responsible for the present spread of artificial water fluoridation in this country. However, I want to make this very definite and positive. The real reason behind water fluoridation is not to benefit children's teeth. If this were a real reason, there are many ways which it could be done, which are much easier, cheaper, and more effective. The real purpose behind water fluoridation is to reduce the resistance of the masses to domination, control, and loss of liberty. Furthermore, when the Nazis decided to go into Poland, the German General Staff and the Russian General Staff exchanged scientific and military ideas, plans, and personnel. The scheme of mass control through water medication was seized upon by the Russian communists because it fitted ideally into their plans to communize the world. I say this in all earnestness and sincerity of the scientists who have spent 20 years research into the chemistry, biochemistry, physiology, and pathology of fluoride. Any person who drinks artificially fluorinated water for a period of 1 year will never again be the same person mentally or physically. When Major General Racy Jordan was in charge of the massive Lend-Lease airlift operation from Great Falls, Montana to Russia via Alaska, he queried the transshipment of considerable amounts of sodium fluoride. He was told, frankly, that it was put into the drinking water of the prisoner of war camps to take away their will to resist. It's interesting that former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who has a background in academic chemistry, initiated a program involving astronomical expenditures of UK revenue to a fluoridation campaign in Northern Ireland. All right. It's what they're doing to you, folks. How are we doing in this chat room? Okay. What do we got here? We're still on the switchboard here. Alright. Alright. We lost Truth Radio. And we lost Crusade. See if we can get them back here. All right, sorry about that, folks. We had a call failed here. Truth Radio, the call failed. We'll try to get that back. We tried to get up Crusade back. Sorry about that. I was reading. We're still on Blog Talk Radio. And I was reading and wasn't able to watch the thing. Need somebody here to probably look over my shoulder. So that call has failed to Truth Radio again. Let's try it again. My apologies to you guys in Crusade. Keep trying to get this better. Keep trying to make it work. All right, we're back. You're listening to The Free American. I am Clay Douglas. Truth Radio dropped there, along with Crusade dropped. The show is still kept on Truth Radio, so that can be, on Blog Talk Radio. So we can still, you can still hear it and they can upload it. And now we're back on Crusade, and we're back on, we're on Blog Talk, we're on Crusade, we're on Truth Radio. Sorry for the break there, folks. Not much I can do about it when the whole thing just drops. We are getting better here. I've got a better internet connection. I've got a better wireless connection. It's actually working pretty good right now. And we'll see. What else did we lose? Did we lose this here? Let me see here. No, we still got YouTube up. Now, if you missed it earlier, the anti-Christian violence is on the rise in Palestine. According to Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz, a gang of 100 followers of Chabad Lubavitch, Yitzhak Ginsburg, have been linked to 24 attacks on Christian monasteries and churches across Palestine since 2009, including 3 since March. On May 9, 2014, the Romanian Orthodox Church in Jerusalem was defaced with the words, "Jesus is garbage," and other spray-painted slogans. On May 5, 2014, "Death to Arabs and Christians" was painted on the Catholic Notre Dame Center in Jerusalem. On March 31st, the words, "Jesus is a monkey, Mary is a cow," was painted on the Deir Rafat Catholic monastery near the city of Beit Shemesh. While a cracked gravestone in a Jewish cemetery usually draws howls of international outrage, none of these attacks have received American news coverage. Judaism is a religion of anti-Christian hatred. According to the Talmud, Christians are Edomites, children of the biblical Esau, and Jesus was a sorcerer who is boiling in pots of feces in hell. Chabad Lubavitch is one of the worst of the Jewish hate groups. It teaches that non-Jews are cattle and were given by Yahweh to Noah to rule over as animals. Folks, it ain't hate. It ain't hate to tell you the truth. God bless you all. Go to freeamerican.com. Have a new magazine coming out on the 1st of September. The old ones are still relevant, still good. And you can make a donation by going to freeamerican.com. God bless you, and thank you for listening.